The Battle of the Bulge, a turning point in World War II. The Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes Counteroffensive, was one of the most significant and decisive battles of World War II. Fought between December 16, 1944, and January 25, 1945, it was the last major German offensive campaign on the Western Front. The battle took place in the densely forested Ardennes region of Wallonia in Belgium, France, and Luxembourg, and it marked a critical moment in the war, ultimately leading to the Allied victory in Europe. This article delves into the strategic context, key events, military tactics, and human stories of the Battle of the Bulge, exploring its impact on the course of World War II and its enduring legacy. The strategic context. The state of the war in late 1944. By late 1944, the Allies had gained significant momentum in Europe. Following the successful D-Day invasion in June 1944, Allied forces had liberated much of France and were advancing toward Germany. However, supply lines were stretched thin, and the Allied advance had slowed due to logistical challenges and stiff German resistance. Hitler's Gambit. Adolf Hitler saw an opportunity to reverse the tide of the war. He planned a massive counteroffensive aimed at splitting the Allied forces, recapturing the vital port of Antwerp, and forcing a negotiated peace on the Western Front. The plan was audacious and risky, relying on surprise, speed, and favorable weather conditions to neutralize Allied air superiority. The Ardennes, a vulnerable front. The Ardennes region was chosen as the site of the offensive due to its rugged terrain and relatively weak Allied defenses. The Germans believed that the dense forests and narrow roads would hinder Allied reinforcements and allow their forces to achieve a breakthrough. The German offensive Operation Watch on the Rhine. The German plan, codenamed Unternehmen Wacht am Rhein, Operation Watch on the Rhine, involved three armies, the 6th Panzer Army, the 5th Panzer Army, and the 7th Army. The offensive began in the early hours of December 16, 1944, with a massive artillery bombardment followed by a rapid advance of infantry and armored units. Initial successes. The Germans achieved significant early successes, catching the Allies off guard. Poor weather conditions grounded Allied aircraft, and the surprise attack overwhelmed thinly stretched American forces. The German advance created a bulge in the Allied front lines, giving the battle its name. Key engagements. The Siege of Bastogne. The town of Bastogne, a critical road junction, became a symbol of Allied resistance. Surrounded by German forces, the 101st Airborne Division and other units held out despite being outnumbered and undersupplied. Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe's famous response of "nuts" to a German surrender demand became legendary. The Malmedy Massacre, one of the most infamous incidents of the battle, where German SS troops executed approximately 84 American prisoners of war near Malmedy, Belgium. The Allied response. Eisenhower's leadership. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower quickly recognized the gravity of the situation and took decisive action. He ordered reinforcements to the Ardennes, including the 82nd Airborne Division and the 3rd Army under General George S. Patton. Patton's remarkable maneuver. General Patton's 3rd Army executed a rapid 90-degree turn and advanced northward to relieve Bastogne, a feat that remains one of the most impressive logistical and tactical achievements of the war. The weather clears. By late December, the weather improved, allowing Allied aircraft to resume operations. This proved decisive, as Allied air power devastated German supply lines and armored columns. The turning point. The German advance stalls. Despite initial successes, the German offensive began to falter due to fuel shortages, stiff Allied resistance, and the inability to capture key objectives like Bastogne. By early January 1945, the Germans were in retreat. The Allied counteroffensive. The Allies launched a coordinated counteroffensive, pushing the Germans back and eliminating the bulge in the front lines. By January 25, 1945, the front had returned to its pre-offensive position. The aftermath. Casualties and losses. The Battle of the Bulge was one of the costliest battles of World War II. The Allies suffered approximately 81,000 casualties, while German losses were estimated at 100,000. The battle also took a heavy toll on civilians in the Ardennes region. Strategic implications. The failure of the Ardennes offensive marked the end of Germany's ability to launch large-scale offensives on the Western Front. It hastened the collapse of the Third Reich and paved the way for the Allied advance into Germany. Legacy and remembrance. The Battle of the Bulge is remembered as a testament to the resilience and determination of Allied forces. It also serves as a reminder of the horrors of war and the sacrifices made by soldiers and civilians alike. Personal stories and heroism. The soldiers experienced. The battle was fought in brutal winter conditions, with temperatures often dropping below freezing. Soldiers on both sides endured immense hardship, from frostbite to starvation. Acts of valor. Numerous acts of heroism occurred during the battle, including the defense of Bastogne, the rescue of trapped units, and the efforts of medics and nurses to save lives under fire. The battle in popular culture. The Battle of the Bulge has been depicted in numerous films, books, and documentaries, including the 1965 film Battle of the Bulge and the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers. These portrayals have helped keep the memory of the battle alive for future generations. The Battle of the Bulge was a pivotal moment in World War II, demonstrating the resolve of the Allied forces and marking the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. Its lessons and legacy continue to resonate today, reminding us of the cost of freedom and the importance of perseverance in the face of adversity. The Battle of the Bulge. A comprehensive analysis of German and Allied strategies. The Battle of the Bulge, also known as the Ardennes counteroffensive, was one of the most significant battles of World War II. Fought from December 16, 1944, to January 25, 1945, it was the last major German offensive on the Western Front. The battle took place in the densely forested Ardennes region of Wallonia in Belgium, France, and Luxembourg, and was characterized by its harsh winter conditions, strategic complexity, and the sheer scale of the forces involved. This article delves into the main strategies employed by both the Germans and the Allies during this pivotal conflict, examining the planning, execution, and outcomes of their respective approaches. The strategic context. The German perspective. By late 1944, Nazi Germany was on the defensive. The Allies had successfully landed in Normandy on D-Day, June 6, 1944, and had been steadily advancing through France and Belgium. The Soviet Union was also making significant gains on the Eastern Front. Facing a two-front war, Adolf Hitler and his military advisors sought a decisive victory in the West to force the Allies to negotiate a separate peace, allowing Germany to concentrate its forces against the Soviet Union. Hitler's strategy was based on several key assumptions: surprise and speed. The Germans aimed to catch the Allies off guard with a sudden, massive offensive. The element of surprise was crucial, as the Allies were not expecting a large-scale German attack in the Ardennes, a region considered unsuitable for major military operations due to its difficult terrain. Weather conditions. The Germans hoped that poor weather would ground the Allied air forces, negating their significant advantage in air superiority. This would allow German ground forces to advance without the constant threat of aerial bombardment. Capture of Antwerp. The ultimate objective of the offensive was to capture the Belgian port of Antwerp, a critical supply hub for the Allies. By seizing Antwerp, the Germans aimed to disrupt Allied supply lines and create a logistical crisis that would force them to retreat. Division of Allied forces. The Germans planned to drive a wedge between the British and American forces, creating confusion and discord among the Allies. This would, in theory, lead to a breakdown in Allied coordination and potentially cause political tensions between the United States and Britain. The Allied perspective. The Allies, having achieved significant successes in the months following D-Day, were focused on maintaining their momentum and advancing towards Germany. However, they were also dealing with stretched supply lines, fatigue among troops, and the challenges of coordinating a multinational force. The Allied strategy during the Battle of the Bulge was initially reactive, as they were caught off guard by the German offensive. However, once the scale of the attack became clear, the Allies implemented a series of countermeasures to contain and ultimately repel the German advance. Key elements of the Allied strategy included flexible defense. The Allies adopted a flexible defensive posture, allowing them to absorb the initial German onslaught and then counterattack once the momentum of the offensive had been blunted. Reinforcement and resupply. Recognizing the importance of maintaining supply lines, the Allies quickly moved to reinforce their positions and ensure that their troops were adequately supplied, despite the challenging winter conditions. Air superiority. Once the weather cleared, the Allies leveraged their air superiority to devastating effect, targeting German supply lines, communication networks, and troop concentrations. Unified command. Despite the initial shock of the German attack, the Allies maintained a unified command structure, with General Dwight D. Eisenhower coordinating the efforts of American, British, and other Allied forces. German operational planning and execution. The plan Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, the German plan. For the Battle of the Bulge, codenamed Operation Wacht am Rhein, was ambitious and risky. It called for a concentrated armored thrust through the Ardennes, aimed at splitting the Allied forces and capturing Antwerp. The operation was divided into several phases. Initial breakthrough. The German offensive began with a massive artillery bombardment followed by a rapid advance of armored and infantry units. The goal was to achieve a breakthrough in the weakly defended Ardennes sector and then exploit this success to drive deep into Allied territory. Capture of key terrain. The Germans aimed to seize key road junctions, bridges, and towns to facilitate their advance and disrupt Allied movements. The town of Bastogne, a critical road hub, was a primary objective. Exploitation and encirclement. Once the initial breakthrough was achieved, German forces were to fan out and encircle Allied units, cutting off their supply lines and forcing them to surrender. Advance to Antwerp. The final phase of the operation involved a rapid advance to Antwerp, with the goal of capturing the port and severing the Allied supply chain. Execution. The German offensive. The German offensive began on December 16, 1944, with a surprise attack that initially achieved significant success. The Allies were caught off guard, and the German forces managed to create a bulge in the Allied lines, giving the battle its name. Initial success. The Germans achieved tactical surprise, and their initial assault overwhelmed the thinly spread Allied defenses. The 6th Panzer Army, led by SS Oberstgruppenführer Joseph Sepp Dietrich, and the 5th Panzer Army, commanded by General Otto von Manteufel, made rapid gains. Bastogne. The town of Bastogne, defended by the U.S. 101st Airborne Division and other units, became a focal point of the battle. Despite being surrounded, the defenders held out, significantly delaying the German advance. Logistical challenges. As the offensive progressed, the Germans faced increasing logistical difficulties. Fuel shortages, poor road conditions, and Allied resistance slowed their advance, preventing them from achieving their objectives on schedule. Allied countermeasures. The Allies quickly mobilized reinforcements and launched counterattacks, gradually stabilizing the front and halting the German advance. Allied operational planning and execution. Initial response. Containment and reinforcement. The Allied response to the German offensive was initially reactive, as they sought to contain the German advance and prevent a breakthrough. Key elements of the Allied strategy during this phase included rapid reinforcement. The Allies quickly moved to reinforce their positions in the Ardennes, deploying reserve units and redirecting forces from other sectors. The U.S. 101st Airborne Division was rushed to Bastogne, while other units were deployed to shore up the flanks. Flexible defense. The Allies adopted a flexible defensive strategy, allowing them to fall back to more defensible positions when necessary while maintaining a cohesive front. This approach helped to absorb the initial German onslaught and buy time for reinforcements to arrive. Air support. Although poor weather initially limited the effectiveness of Allied air power, as conditions improved, the Allies were able to leverage their air superiority to disrupt German supply lines and provide close air support to ground troops. Counteroffensive. The Allied pushback. Once the German advance had been halted, the Allies shifted to the offensive, launching a series of counterattacks aimed at eliminating the Bulge and restoring the front lines. Key elements of the Allied counteroffensive included Patton's Third Army. General George S. Patton's Third Army played a crucial role in the Allied counteroffensive. Patton's forces launched a rapid relief operation to break the siege of Bastogne, demonstrating remarkable mobility and coordination. Operation Bodenplatte. In a desperate attempt to regain air superiority, the Germans launched Operation Bodenplatte on January 1, 1945, targeting Allied airfields. However, the operation resulted in heavy losses for the Luftwaffe and failed to achieve its objectives. Allied air superiority. As the weather cleared, Allied air power became a decisive factor. The Allies conducted extensive bombing raids on German supply lines, communication networks, and troop concentrations, severely hampering the German war effort. Final push. By mid-January 1945, the Allies had regained the initiative and were pushing the Germans back. The Bulge was gradually eliminated, and the front lines were restored to their pre-offensive positions. Key battles and engagements. The Siege of Bastogne. The Siege of Bastogne was one of the most critical engagements of the Battle of the Bulge. The town, a key road junction, was defended by the U.S. 101st Airborne Division and other units. Despite being surrounded and outnumbered, the defenders held out against repeated German assaults. The arrival of Patton's Third Army on December 26, 1944, broke the siege and marked a turning point in the battle. The Malmedy Massacre. One of the most infamous incidents of the Battle of the Bulge was the Malmedy Massacre, where members of the Waffen-SS murdered approximately 84 American prisoners of war. The massacre became a symbol of German brutality and further hardened Allied resolve. The Battle of St. Vith. The town of St. Vith, another critical road junction, was the site of fierce fighting. The U.S. 7th Armored Division, along with other units, held out against overwhelming German forces for several days, delaying the German advance and buying time for Allied reinforcements to arrive. The Battle of Elsenborn Ridge. The Battle of Elsenborn Ridge was a key defensive engagement that prevented the Germans from breaking through to the north. The U.S. 2nd and 99th Infantry Divisions, along with other units, successfully held the ridge against repeated German attacks, blunting the northern thrust of the offensive. Tactical innovations and adaptations. German tactics. The Germans employed several innovative tactics during the Battle of the Bulge, including infiltration tactics. German infantry units used infiltration tactics to bypass Allied strongpoints and penetrate deep into enemy territory. These tactics were particularly effective in the initial stages of the offensive. Use of special forces. The Germans deployed special forces, such as Operation Greif, which involved English-speaking German soldiers dressed in American uniforms to spread confusion and disrupt Allied communications. Armored spearheads. The Germans concentrated their armored forces into powerful spearheads, aiming to achieve rapid breakthroughs and exploit weaknesses in the Allied lines. Allied tactics. The Allies also adapted their tactics to counter the German offensive, including defensive flexibility. The Allies adopted a flexible defensive strategy, allowing them to fall back to more defensible positions when necessary while maintaining a cohesive front. Rapid reinforcement. The Allies demonstrated remarkable speed in reinforcing threatened sectors, moving troops and supplies to the front lines with impressive efficiency. Air-ground coordination. As the weather cleared, the Allies leveraged their air superiority to provide close air support to ground troops, disrupting German movements and supply lines. Logistical challenges and solutions. German logistical challenges. The German offensive was hampered by significant logistical challenges, including fuel shortages. The German armored units were heavily dependent on fuel, and shortages quickly became a critical issue. Many tanks and vehicles were abandoned due to lack of fuel. Poor road conditions. The Ardennes region's narrow, winding roads and difficult terrain slowed the German advance, particularly as the weather worsened. Allied interdiction. As the Allies regained air superiority, they targeted German supply lines, further exacerbating logistical difficulties. Allied logistical solutions. The Allies, despite being initially caught off guard, were able to overcome logistical challenges through efficient supply lines. The Allies maintained efficient supply lines, ensuring that troops were adequately supplied with ammunition, food, and fuel. Rapid reinforcement. The Allies demonstrated remarkable speed in reinforcing threatened sectors, moving troops and supplies to the front lines with impressive efficiency. Air resupply. In some cases, the Allies used air resupply to deliver critical supplies to isolated units, such as the defenders of Bastogne. Intelligence and deception. German deception operations. The Germans employed several deception operations to mask their intentions and confuse the Allies, including Operation Greif. As mentioned earlier, Operation Greif involved German soldiers dressed in American uniforms to spread confusion and disrupt Allied communications. Radio silence. The Germans maintained strict radio silence in the lead-up to the offensive, preventing the Allies from detecting their preparations. Allied intelligence failures and successes. The Allies initially failed to anticipate the German offensive, due in part to overconfidence and a lack of intelligence. However, once the attack began, Allied intelligence quickly adapted, providing critical information that helped to counter the German advance. Ultra intercepts. The Allies were able to decrypt German communications using the Ultra Intelligence System, providing valuable insights into German intentions and movements. Reconnaissance. Allied reconnaissance efforts, both on the ground and in the air, helped to identify German troop concentrations and supply routes, enabling targeted counterattacks. The human dimension, leadership and morale. German leadership. The German offensive was characterized by a high degree of centralized control, with Hitler personally involved in the planning and execution of the operation. However, This top-down approach also led to inflexibility and a lack of initiative among field commanders. Hitler's role. Hitler's insistence on maintaining the offensive, even when it became clear that the objectives were unattainable, contributed to the eventual failure of the operation. Field commanders, German field commanders, such as Sepp Dietrich and Otto von Manteufel, demonstrated tactical skill but were often constrained by Hitler's directives. Allied leadership. The Allied response to the German offensive was marked by effective leadership and coordination, particularly at the higher levels of command. Eisenhower's role. General Dwight D. Eisenhower played a crucial role in coordinating the Allied response, ensuring that reinforcements were quickly deployed and that the front remained cohesive. Patton's initiative. General George S. Patton's rapid relief of Bastogne demonstrated his tactical brilliance and ability to adapt to changing circumstances. Bradley and Montgomery. General Omar Bradley and Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery also played key roles in the Allied counteroffensive, with Montgomery taking command of the northern sector of the front. Morale and resilience. The Battle of the Bulge was a test of morale and resilience for both sides. The harsh winter conditions, the intensity of the fighting, and the high casualties took a toll on troops on both sides. German morale was initially high, buoyed by the success of the initial offensive. However, as the advance stalled and casualties mounted, morale began to decline. Allied morale was initially shaken by the surprise attack, but the successful defense of key positions, such as Bastogne, and the eventual counteroffensive helped to restore confidence. The aftermath and impact. Casualties and losses. The Battle of the Bulge was one of the costliest battles of World War II, with significant casualties on both sides. German casualties. The Germans suffered approximately 100,000 casualties, including killed, wounded, and captured. The loss of experienced troops and equipment was a severe blow to the German war effort. Allied casualties. The Allies suffered around 80,000 casualties, including 19,000 killed. The battle was particularly costly for the U.S. Army, which bore the brunt of the fighting. Strategic implications. The failure of the German offensive had significant strategic implications for the remainder of the war. German defeat. The Battle of the Bulge marked the last major German offensive on the Western Front. The failure of the operation effectively ended any hope of a negotiated peace and hastened the collapse of Nazi Germany. Allied victory. The successful defense and subsequent counteroffensive demonstrated the resilience and effectiveness of the Allied forces. The battle also highlighted the importance of air superiority and logistical efficiency in modern warfare. Path to victory. The Allied victory in the Battle of the Bulge paved the way for the final advance into Germany, leading to the eventual defeat of the Nazi regime in May 1945. The Battle of the Bulge was a complex and multifaceted conflict that tested the strategic, operational, and tactical capabilities of both the Germans and the Allies. The Germans, despite achieving initial success, were ultimately unable to overcome the logistical challenges, Allied resilience, and the overwhelming superiority of Allied air power. The Allies, though initially caught off guard, demonstrated remarkable flexibility, coordination, and determination in containing and ultimately repelling the German offensive. The battle had significant implications for the outcome of World War II, marking the beginning of the end for Nazi Germany and setting the stage for the final Allied advance into Germany. The strategies employed by both sides during the Battle of the Bulge continue to be studied by military historians and strategists, offering valuable lessons on the importance of surprise, logistics, leadership, and adaptability in warfare. In the end, the Battle of the Bulge stands as a testament to the courage and resilience of the soldiers who fought in one of the most challenging and decisive battles of World War II. How did the weather conditions impact the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge? The Battle of the Bulge, fought from December 16, 1944, to January 25, 1945, was one of the most significant and decisive battles of World War II. It was the last major German offensive campaign on the Western Front, aimed at splitting the Allied forces and recapturing the port of Antwerp to force a negotiated peace. The battle took place in the densely forested Ardennes region of Wallonia in Belgium, France, and Luxembourg, and it involved over 1 million soldiers, making it one of the largest and bloodiest battles the United States Army has ever fought. While the battle's outcome was influenced by numerous factors, including strategy, logistics, and the resilience of the troops, one of the most critical and often overlooked elements was the weather. The harsh winter conditions of the Ardennes played a pivotal role in shaping the course of the battle, affecting both the German offensive and the Allied defense. This article will explore in detail how the weather conditions impacted the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge, examining the effects on troop movements, air support, supply lines, and morale. The strategic importance of the Ardennes. The Ardennes, a historical battleground. The Ardennes region, characterized by its dense forests, rolling hills, and narrow roads, has long been a strategic crossroads in European military history. Its challenging terrain has made it a natural defensive barrier, but it has also been the site of several significant military campaigns, including the German invasion of France in 1940 during World War II. The German plan, Operation Watch on the Rhine in late 1944, with the Allied forces advancing towards Germany, Adolf Hitler conceived a bold plan to launch a surprise offensive through the Ardennes. The operation, codenamed Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, aimed to split the Allied forces, capture the vital port of Antwerp, and force the Western Allies to negotiate a separate peace, allowing Germany to focus its resources on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union. The Allied disposition, overconfidence and vulnerability. The Allied forces, having achieved significant successes in the preceding months, were caught off guard by the German offensive. The Ardennes was considered a quiet sector, and the Allied command had deployed relatively inexperienced troops to hold the line. This overconfidence, combined with the challenging terrain and weather conditions, set the stage for one of the most dramatic battles of the war. The weather conditions in the Ardennes. The winter of 1944 to 1945, a harsh and unforgiving season. The winter of 1944 to 1945 was one of the coldest and snowiest in European history. The Ardennes region, already known for its harsh winters, experienced extreme weather conditions that significantly impacted military operations. Temperatures frequently dropped below freezing, and heavy snowfall blanketed the landscape, creating a challenging environment for both the German and Allied forces. The impact of snow and ice on mobility. The heavy snowfall and icy conditions had a profound effect on the mobility of troops and vehicles. The narrow, winding roads of the Ardennes became treacherous, making it difficult for both sides to move troops, equipment, and supplies. Tanks and other armored vehicles struggled to navigate the slippery terrain, and the snow-covered landscape made it challenging to establish defensive positions. The role of fog and low visibility. In addition to the snow and ice, the Ardennes region was frequently shrouded in dense fog, which severely limited visibility. This had a significant impact on reconnaissance, artillery targeting, and air support. The foggy conditions made it difficult for both sides to gather intelligence on enemy movements and positions, leading to confusion and miscommunication. The effect of cold on troop morale and health. The extreme cold took a toll on the morale and health of the soldiers. Frostbite and hypothermia were common, and the lack of adequate winter clothing and shelter exacerbated the suffering. The cold also affected the performance of weapons and equipment, with rifles and machine guns often jamming due to the freezing temperatures. The German offensive and the weather. The initial surprise, weather as a double-edged sword. The German offensive began on December 16, 1944, under the cover of dense fog and low clouds. The poor visibility initially worked in favor of the Germans, as it hindered Allied reconnaissance and air support. The element of surprise allowed the German forces to achieve significant gains in the early stages of the battle, catching the Allied forces off guard. The challenges of mobility and supply. However, as the battle progressed, the harsh weather conditions began to take their toll on the German offensive. The snow and ice made it difficult for the German forces to maintain their momentum, as tanks and vehicles became bogged down in the treacherous terrain. The narrow roads of the Ardennes became clogged with traffic, leading to delays and logistical nightmares. The impact on German air support. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was severely hampered by the weather conditions. The low clouds and fog made it nearly impossible for German aircraft to provide effective air support, leaving the ground forces without the crucial cover they needed to advance. This lack of air support was a significant factor in the eventual failure of the German offensive. The strain on German logistics. The harsh weather also placed a tremendous strain on German logistics. The supply lines, already stretched thin, were further disrupted by the snow and ice. Fuel, ammunition, and food became scarce, and the German forces were unable to sustain their advance. The lack of supplies, combined with the deteriorating weather conditions, contributed to the eventual collapse of the German offensive. The Allied defense and the weather. The initial shock, Allied disarray. The Allied forces were initially caught off guard by the German offensive, and the poor weather conditions added to the confusion. The dense fog and low visibility made it difficult for the Allies to assess the situation and coordinate their response. The inexperienced troops deployed in the Ardennes were ill-prepared for the harsh winter conditions, and many units were quickly overwhelmed by the German advance. The role of air power, grounded by the weather. One of the most significant advantages the Allies had over the Germans was their superior air power. However, the poor weather conditions initially grounded the Allied air forces, depriving them of a crucial asset. The low clouds and fog made it impossible for Allied aircraft to provide close air support, conduct reconnaissance, or disrupt German supply lines. The turning point, clearing skies and Allied resurgence. As the battle progressed, the weather began to clear, and the Allied air forces were able to take to the skies. This marked a turning point in the battle, as the Allies were able to unleash their air power against the German forces. Allied fighter bombers targeted German supply lines, tanks, and troop concentrations, severely hampering the German advance. The resumption of air support also boosted Allied morale and provided much-needed relief to the beleaguered ground forces. The impact on Allied logistics and reinforcements. The harsh weather conditions also affected Allied logistics, but the Allies were better equipped to handle the challenges. The Allied supply lines, though strained, were more resilient than those of the Germans. The Allies were able to bring in reinforcements and supplies, albeit with difficulty, and the clearing weather allowed for more efficient resupply efforts. The ability to maintain a steady flow of reinforcements and supplies was a critical factor in the Allied defense and eventual counteroffensive. The human cost, weather and morale. The toll on German morale. The harsh weather conditions took a heavy toll on the morale of the German troops. The extreme cold, combined with the lack of adequate winter clothing and shelter, led to widespread suffering and discontent. The failure of the offensive to achieve its objectives, coupled with the deteriorating weather and supply situation, further eroded German morale. Many German soldiers, already weary from years of war, began to lose hope as the battle dragged on. The resilience of Allied troops. On the Allied side, the weather conditions also tested the resilience of the troops. The extreme cold and snow made life in the trenches unbearable, and the constant threat of German attacks added to the stress. However, the Allied troops, bolstered by the knowledge that they were fighting to defend their homeland and the promise of eventual victory, were able to maintain their morale and determination. The arrival of reinforcements and the resumption of air support also provided a much-needed boost to Allied spirits. The psychological impact of winter warfare. The Battle of the Bulge was not just a physical battle, it was also a psychological one. The harsh winter conditions, combined with the constant threat of enemy attack, created a sense of isolation and vulnerability among the troops. The psychological impact of winter warfare, with its long nights, freezing temperatures, and relentless snow, cannot be underestimated. Both sides had to contend with the mental strain of fighting in such an unforgiving environment, and this played a significant role in the outcome of the battle. The role of weather in key engagements. The Siege of Bastogne, a test of endurance. One of the most iconic episodes of the Battle of the Bulge was the Siege of Bastogne, a key crossroads town that was surrounded by German forces. The defenders, primarily from the U.S. 101st Airborne Division, were cut off from reinforcements and supplies, and the harsh weather conditions added to their ordeal. The extreme cold and snow made it difficult to maintain defensive positions, and the lack of adequate winter clothing led to widespread cases of frostbite and hypothermia. Despite these challenges, the defenders of Bastogne held out against overwhelming odds, and their resilience became a symbol of Allied determination. The Battle of Saint-Vith's struggle in the snow. Another critical engagement was the Battle for Saint-Vith, a key transportation hub that was fiercely contested by both sides. The harsh weather conditions played a significant role in the fighting, as the snow and ice made it difficult for both sides to maneuver and maintain supply lines. The defenders, primarily from the U.S. 7th Armored Division, were able to hold out long enough to disrupt the German timetable, but the extreme weather conditions took a heavy toll on both sides. The counteroffensive, clearing skies and Allied advance. As the weather began to clear in late December, the Allies launched a counteroffensive to push back the German forces. The improved weather conditions allowed the Allies to bring their superior air power to bear, and the resumption of air support played a crucial role in the Allied advance. The clearing skies also made it easier for the Allies to coordinate their ground forces and bring in reinforcements and supplies. The combination of improved weather and Allied resilience turned the tide of the battle, leading to the eventual collapse of the German offensive. The aftermath and legacy of the battle. The cost of the battle. A heavy price in blood. The Battle of the Bulge was one of the costliest battles of World War II, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The harsh weather conditions added to the toll, as the extreme cold and snow led to widespread cases of frostbite, hypothermia, and other cold-related injuries. The battle also took a heavy psychological toll on the troops, many of whom were left traumatized by the experience of fighting in such an unforgiving environment. The strategic outcome, a turning point in the war. Despite the heavy cost, the Battle of the Bulge marked a turning point in the war. The failure of the German offensive effectively ended any hope of a negotiated peace, and the Allied victory paved the way for the final push into Germany. The battle also demonstrated the importance of weather in military operations, and it highlighted the need for adequate preparation and logistics in winter warfare. The legacy of the battle. Lessons learned. The Battle of the Bulge left a lasting legacy, both in terms of military strategy and the human cost of war. The battle underscored the importance of weather in military operations, and it highlighted the need for adequate preparation and logistics in winter warfare. The resilience and determination of the Allied troops, despite the harsh conditions, became a symbol of the Allied commitment to victory. The battle also served as a reminder of the human cost of war, and it left a lasting impact on those who fought and survived. The Battle of the Bulge was a pivotal moment in World War II, and the weather conditions played a crucial role in shaping its outcome. The harsh winter of 1944 to 1945, with its extreme cold, heavy snowfall, and dense fog, created a challenging environment for both the German and Allied forces. The weather initially favored the German offensive, providing cover and hindering Allied air support, but as the battle progressed, the harsh conditions began to take their toll on the German forces, disrupting their supply lines and hampering their mobility. For the Allies, the weather was a double-edged sword. The initial poor conditions hindered their ability to respond to the German offensive, but as the skies cleared, the Allies were able to bring their superior air power to bear, turning the tide of the battle. The resilience and determination of the Allied troops, despite the harsh conditions, played a crucial role in the eventual Allied victory. The Battle of the Bulge serves as a stark reminder of the importance of weather in military operations and the need for adequate preparation and logistics in winter warfare. The battle also highlights the human cost of war, as the extreme conditions took a heavy toll on the troops, both physically and psychologically. The legacy of the Battle of the Bulge endures as a testament to the resilience and determination of those who fought in one of the most challenging and decisive battles of World War II. The role of the 101st Airborne Division in the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge, fought from December 16, 1944, to January 25, 1945, was one of the most significant and brutal engagements of World War II. It was the last major German offensive campaign on the Western Front, aimed at splitting the Allied forces and recapturing the vital port of Antwerp. The battle took place in the densely forested Ardennes region of Wallonia in Belgium, France, and Luxembourg, and it involved over 1 million soldiers, making it one of the largest battles fought by the United States during the war. Among the many units that played crucial roles in this battle, the 101st Airborne Division stands out for its heroic defense of the key crossroads town of Bastogne. The division's actions during the siege of Bastogne not only halted the German advance but also became a symbol of American resilience and determination. This article delves into the detailed account of the 101st Airborne Division's role in the Battle of the Bulge, examining their strategic importance, the challenges they faced, and the legacy they left behind. The 101st Airborne Division, background and formation. The creation of the 101st Airborne Division. The 101st Airborne Division, also known as the Screaming Eagles, was activated on August 16, 1942, at Camp Claiborne, Louisiana. The division was part of the United States Army's effort to create airborne units capable of conducting parachute and glider assaults behind enemy lines. The concept of airborne warfare was relatively new at the time, and the 101st Airborne Division was one of the first units to be trained in this specialized form of combat. The division's insignia, a bald eagle on a black shield, symbolized its airborne status and its role as a rapid deployment force. The nickname Screaming Eagles was derived from the division's distinctive shoulder patch, which featured the eagle's head. The 101st Airborne Division was initially composed of the 501st, 502nd, and 506th Parachute Infantry Regiments, along with supporting artillery, engineer, and medical units. Training and early deployments. The 101st Airborne Division underwent rigorous training at various locations in the United States, including Fort Benning, Georgia, and Camp Mackle, North Carolina. The training focused on parachute jumps, glider landings, and small unit tactics. The division's soldiers were trained to be highly mobile, self-sufficient, and capable of operating in hostile environments with limited support. The division's first major deployment was during the Normandy invasion on June 6, 1944, as part of Operation Overlord. The 101st Airborne Division was tasked with securing key objectives behind Utah Beach, including causeways and bridges, to facilitate the landing of Allied forces. Despite being scattered during the parachute drop, the division successfully accomplished its missions and played a crucial role in the success of the D-Day landings following the Normandy campaign. The 101st Airborne Division participated in Operation Market Garden, an ambitious Allied plan to capture key bridges in the Netherlands and open a path into Germany. Although the operation ultimately failed to achieve its objectives, the division's performance demonstrated its effectiveness in airborne operations and its ability to adapt to changing battlefield conditions. The situation before the Battle of the Bulge. By December 1944, the 101st Airborne Division had been withdrawn from the front lines and was stationed in the Reims area of France for rest and refitting. The division had suffered significant casualties during its previous campaigns, and many of its units were under strength. However, the division's leadership, including Major General Maxwell D. Taylor and his deputy, Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, worked diligently to rebuild the division's combat effectiveness. The Allied forces were preparing for a final push into Germany, and the 101st Airborne Division was expected to play a key role in future operations. However, the German High Command had other plans. Under the leadership of Adolf Hitler, the Germans launched a surprise offensive through the Ardennes forest, catching the Allies off guard and setting the stage for the Battle of the Bulge. The German offensive, the Ardennes counteroffensive. The German plan. The German offensive, known as Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, was a bold and risky plan designed to split the Allied forces and recapture the port of Antwerp. The plan called for a rapid advance through the Ardennes forest, a region that was lightly defended by Allied forces due to its difficult terrain. The Germans hoped to achieve surprise and exploit the element of shock to break through the Allied lines. The offensive was spearheaded by the 6th Panzer Army, led by SS Oberstgruppenführer Joseph Sepp Dietrich, and the 5th Panzer Army, commanded by General Otto von Manschufel. The German forces included a mix of experienced veterans and newly conscripted soldiers, as well as a significant number of armored units equipped with tanks such as the Panther and Tiger II. The German plan relied on several key factors: the element of surprise, the rapid capture of key road junctions, and the disruption of Allied supply lines. The success of the offensive depended on the ability of the German forces to quickly advance and secure their objectives before the Allies could react and reinforce their positions. The initial German advance. The German offensive began in the early hours of December 16, 1944, with a massive artillery bombardment followed by a ground assault. The initial attack achieved surprise, and the German forces quickly overwhelmed the thinly spread Allied defenses in the Ardennes. The 6th Panzer Army advanced towards the northern sector of the front, while the 5th Panzer Army pushed through the center. The German advance was aided by poor weather conditions, which grounded Allied air support and limited the effectiveness of reconnaissance. The dense fog and overcast skies also made it difficult for Allied commanders to assess the situation and coordinate their response. As the German forces advanced, they encountered resistance from scattered Allied units, including elements of the U.S. 28th and 106th Infantry Divisions. However, the German momentum was strong, and they quickly captured key towns and road junctions, creating a bulge in the Allied front lines. The Allied response. The Allied High Command was initially slow to react to the German offensive, as they underestimated the scale and intent of the attack. However, as the situation became clearer, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Supreme Allied Commander, recognized the seriousness of the threat and began to mobilize reinforcements to contain the German advance point. One of the key decisions made by Eisenhower was to deploy the 101st Airborne Division to the critical crossroads town of Bastogne. Bastogne was a vital transportation hub, with several major roads converging in the town. Control of Bastogne was essential for both the German and Allied forces, as it would determine the flow of supplies and reinforcements to the front lines. The 101st Airborne Division, along with elements of the 10th Armored Division, was ordered to move to Bastogne as quickly as possible. The division's rapid deployment to the town would prove to be a decisive factor in the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge, the Siege of Bastogne. The road to Bastogne on December 18, 1944, the 101st Airborne Division received orders to move to Bastogne. The division was initially stationed in the Reims area, approximately 100 miles from Bastogne. The move was conducted under extreme urgency, with the division's units being transported by trucks and other available vehicles. The journey to Bastogne was fraught with challenges. The roads were congested with retreating Allied units and civilian refugees, and the division had to navigate through difficult terrain and poor weather conditions. Despite these obstacles, the 101st Airborne Division managed to reach Bastogne on December 19, just in time to reinforce the town's defenses. Upon arrival, the division was placed under the command of Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, as Major General Maxwell D. Taylor was attending a staff conference in the United States. McAuliffe would play a crucial role in the defense of Bastogne, earning a place in history for his leadership and determination. The defense of Bastogne, the 101st Airborne Division, along with elements of the 10th Armored Division and other supporting units, quickly established defensive positions around Bastogne. The town was surrounded by dense forests and rolling hills, providing natural cover and concealment for the defenders. The division's soldiers dug in and prepared for the inevitable German assault. The German forces, led by the 5th Panzer Army, began their attack on Bastogne on December 20. The initial assaults were met with fierce resistance from the 101st Airborne Division, which used its superior training and tactics to repel the German attacks. The division's soldiers fought with determination and courage, often engaging in close-quarters combat and house-to-house fighting. The German forces, despite their numerical superiority and armored support, were unable to break through the American defenses. The 101st Airborne Division's ability to hold Bastogne was critical in slowing the German advance and buying time for the Allies to organize a counteroffensive. The encircled division. By December 21, the German forces had completely surrounded Bastogne, cutting off the town from Allied supply lines and reinforcements. The 101st Airborne Division, along with the other units in Bastogne, was now isolated and under siege. The situation was dire, with the defenders facing shortages of food, ammunition, and medical supplies. Despite the encirclement, the morale of the 101st Airborne Division remained high. The division's soldiers were determined to hold their positions and resist the German onslaught. The leadership of Brigadier General McAuliffe was instrumental in maintaining the defenders' resolve. McAuliffe's famous response to a German surrender demand, "Nuts," became a symbol of the division's defiance and determination. The defenders of Bastogne also benefited from the support of the local Belgian population, who provided food, shelter, and assistance to the wounded. The civilians' resilience and cooperation were crucial in sustaining the defenders during the siege. The relief of Bastogne. The siege of Bastogne lasted for several days, with the 101st Airborne Division and its supporting units enduring constant German attacks and artillery bombardments. However, the tide began to turn on December 26, when elements of the U.S. 4th Armored Division, part of General George S. Patton's 3rd Army, broke through the German lines and reached Bastogne. The relief of Bastogne was a significant turning point in the Battle of the Bulge. The 101st Airborne Division's successful defense of the town had disrupted the German timetable and forced them to divert resources to the siege. The arrival of reinforcements allowed the defenders to go on the offensive and push back the German forces. The 101st Airborne Division continued to play a key role in the Allied counteroffensive, participating in the liberation of surrounding towns and the eventual defeat of the German forces in the Ardennes. The division's actions during the Battle of the Bulge earned it widespread recognition and cemented its reputation as one of the most elite units in the U.S. Army. The aftermath and legacy. The impact of the 101st Airborne Division's actions. The 101st Airborne Division's defense of Bastogne was a critical factor in the Allied victory in the Battle of the Bulge. The division's ability to hold the town against overwhelming odds disrupted the German offensive and allowed the Allies to regroup and launch a counteroffensive. The Siege of Bastogne also demonstrated the effectiveness of airborne units in defensive operations and highlighted the importance of rapid deployment and mobility in modern warfare. The division's actions during the battle earned it numerous accolades and commendations. Brigadier General McAuliffe was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for his leadership, and the division as a whole received the Presidential Unit Citation for its heroic defense of Bastogne. The 101st Airborne Division's performance in the Battle of the Bulge solidified its reputation as one of the most elite and effective units in the U.S. Army. The human cost. The Battle of the Bulge was one of the costliest engagements of World War II, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The 101st Airborne Division, despite its success, paid a high price for its defense of Bastogne. The division suffered over 2,000 casualties during the battle, including killed, wounded, and missing. The harsh winter conditions, combined with the intense combat, took a toll on the division's soldiers, many of whom endured frostbite, exhaustion, and other hardships. The human cost of the battle extended beyond the soldiers on the front lines. The civilian population of the Ardennes region also suffered greatly, with many towns and villages being destroyed or heavily damaged during the fighting. The resilience and cooperation of the local population were crucial in supporting the Allied forces and contributing to the eventual victory. The legacy of the 101st Airborne Division. The 101st Airborne Division's role in the Battle of the Bulge left a lasting legacy that continues to be celebrated and remembered. The division's actions during the Siege of Bastogne became a symbol of American courage, determination, and resilience. The story of the battered bastards of Bastogne has been immortalized in books, films, and other media, ensuring that the division's contributions to the Allied victory are not forgotten. The 101st Airborne Division's performance in the Battle of the Bulge also had a significant impact on the development of airborne warfare. The division's success in defensive operations demonstrated the versatility and effectiveness of airborne units, leading to their continued use in future conflicts. The lessons learned during the battle influenced the training and tactics of airborne forces, shaping their role in modern military operations. The 101st Airborne Division. In post-war years following the end of World War II, the 101st Airborne Division continued to play a prominent role in the U.S. Army. The division was deactivated in 1945 but was reactivated in 1956 as a training unit. During the Cold War, the division was reorganized as an airborne division and later as an air assault division, reflecting the changing nature of warfare and the need for rapid deployment capabilities. The 101st Airborne Division saw action in several conflicts, including the Vietnam War, the Gulf War, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The division's legacy from the Battle of the Bulge continued to inspire its soldiers, who upheld the traditions of courage, determination, and excellence that were established during World War II. Conclusion. The 101st Airborne Division's role in the Battle of the Bulge was a defining moment in the history of the division and the U.S. Army. The division's heroic defense of Bastogne against overwhelming odds demonstrated the effectiveness of airborne units and the importance of rapid deployment and mobility in modern warfare. The actions of the 101st Airborne Division during the battle not only contributed to the Allied victory but also left a lasting legacy that continues to be celebrated and remembered. The story of the 101st Airborne Division in the Battle of the Bulge is a testament to the courage, determination, and resilience of the American soldier. The division's performance during the Siege of Bastogne became a symbol of American military prowess and a source of inspiration for future generations. The legacy of the 101st Airborne Division serves as a reminder of the sacrifices made by those who fought in World War II and the importance of honoring their contributions to the cause of freedom and democracy. As we reflect on the events of the Battle of the Bulge and the role of the 101st Airborne Division, we are reminded of the enduring values of courage, sacrifice, and perseverance that define the American spirit. The story of the Screaming Eagles in the Ardennes is a powerful reminder of the price of freedom and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. The legacy of the 101st Airborne Division will continue to inspire and guide us as we face the challenges of the future.